In June 1986, a remarkable gathering took place here in beautiful Snowmass, Colorado, the Windstar Foundation's first annual Choices for the Future Symposium. The symposium brought together an extraordinarily diverse group of 1,000 participants, all concerned with the future of our planet, all seeking to chart a course for our future. They are people who live out of passion and commitment to a global community, a you and me world. For 3 days, we listened to knowledgeable speakers with an incredible understanding of the state of our planet and the possibilities for its future. We interacted with each other, played together, sang together, and felt a wonderful camaraderie. Our children were part of the Earth Keepers program, learning exciting ways to care for our Earth. Together, we participated in the powerful experience of the choices facing humankind in a unique evening event called The State of Our Planet. I'm John Denver, co-founder of the Windstar Foundation. And what's exciting to us here at Windstar is that the symposium did not end after 3 days. The participants have taken what they learned and what they felt and are expressing it in their daily lives. They are consciously making choices creating the future. Because of the power of our experience, we want you too to share in the ideas, spirit, and inspiration of the Choices for the Future Symposium. During this program, you'll be hearing from a number of participants who were speakers. Jean-Michel Cousteau, a founder of the Cousteau Society and leading spokesman for our marine environment. Apollo 9 astronaut Rusty Schweickart, who since leaving NASA has been active in citizen diplomacy and facilitating U.S.-Soviet relations. Ted Turner, who heads Turner Broadcasting and Cable News Network, is the founder of the Better World Society, dedicated to bringing critical global issues into the media. Dr. Gerald Jampolsky and Diane Cerencioni are co-directors of Children as Teachers of Peace. They brought to the conference Win Vu, who experienced an arduous escape from Vietnam, and Convetta Burke, a 16-year-old from Atlanta. Influential experts in energy and resource policy, Hunter and Amory Lovins, who head the Rocky Mountain Institute. Currently president of Global Water Incorporated, Dr. Peter Bourne is an international expert on hunger, health, and development issues. Participants who were not speakers came to learn and to share themselves.
This is an incredible happening. It's some of the greatest minds and hearts in America together to talk about choices, which is an extremely important thing when you realize that we're the only creature that has the power to choose, the power to decide what actions we take.
As we began to examine the present choices facing humankind, we confronted what isn't working in our world. The choices we made in the past that have led to hunger, poverty, and oppression, to environmental destruction, and to an ever-escalating nuclear arms race. We recognize that we are at a very critical point in human history.
I really feel that we're at a war, and a war that will determine whether or not the human race, or indeed, if any forms of higher life, continue to exist on this planet past the next few years. Less than 1% of Africa's wildlife that was alive 150 years ago remains alive today. Today, as we sit here, 100 square miles of Africa became desert. Over 5,000 acres of the Amazon alone was cut down. And the other thing is we talk about aid to Africa, and it's really nice that Live Aid was terrific, and it's really wonderful that the New York school children contributed a plane load full of food. But the fact of the matter is that Africa pays out to the rich world each year over 3 times as much in interest and other payments as they receive in aid and payments for us. It actually is what actually is happening is the poorer part of the world is getting poorer and the rich are getting richer. And basically it's because we're such much better traders than they are. The third world is in the problem that it's in primarily because we put it there. You know, we can do all the singing we want to, but we need to change our policy.
After 40 years of service in high levels at the United Nations, Robert Mueller is now Chancellor of the UN's University of Peace in Costa Rica.
There are very few people who dare to visualize the future. And as you do it for a nation, we have to have the courage to visualize the future for the world as a whole. This planet is not managed. The political system which we have for this planet is appalling. If a team from outer space would come down here, they would say, you must be kidding. That is definitely not a way of managing a planet. They would give us F in planetary management. What we have done in the United Nations, what I told you, was done for a budget that is less than 1/3 of a nuclear trident a year. The whole United States contribution to the United Nations is equal what the United States is paying for its military music. It is, for me, it is appalling to see what the world spends on its global management. It is a scandal. The second point, which I would consider very, very important, is the reconciliation between the United States and the Soviet Union. I've lived now in the United Nations for 40 years. If the United Nations has not been successful, I can tell you it is primarily because these two countries cannot get along. I would even recommend to Ted Turner, perhaps with some great people in the field of telecommunications, to come up with a telecommunication system where these people could talk to each other every day. There is no reason. I will never forget the visit we had with Mr. Chu Enlai, who said, I'm sitting here trying to figure out what the Americans and the Russians are scheming against us, but it occurs to me that perhaps nobody is scheming anything, but we don't talk to each other.
Richard Lamb, governor of Colorado, has been a nationally known gubernatorial leader and is outspoken about the choices facing our planet.
Like the wedding guest in The Ancient Mariner, I sort of go around and grab everybody that I can find and tell them that I think that humanity is underestimating the seriousness of our problem. That has given me the title of Governor Gloom. I don't think that's the way I feel about it anyway. I'm a politician. I can make things sound better than they are. Albert Schweitzer tried to warn us when he said, we have lost the ability to foresee and forestall, and we shall end by destroying the world. Our civilization is trying to run a marathon as if it were a 100-yard dash. We thought the earth limitless, and even after the astronauts brought back for their marvelous pictures of the finite globe, we continue to act, and we do act, as if we could have endlessly abused the earth.
Leading conservationist David Brower founded Friends of the Earth and the Earth Island Institute.
We decide rather soon what kinds of growth we must have and what kinds we can no longer afford. And those that we can no longer afford, I submit, are the kinds that are sustained by our borrowing from our children. But I think what we're doing, because we really have no intention of paying them back, is stealing from them, and I don't think that's an ethical thing to do. Don't steal from your children. Right now, I'm convinced that peace is not financially responsible. It's not economically feasible, rather, in the United States. As long as it isn't here, it won't be in the Soviet Union, because they'll have to match us even as we keep matching them. I know it is not economically feasible in California. We grow a quarter of the food that people in this country eat in California. Agriculture grosses about $14 billion a year. Our defense industries and contracts bring us $50 billion a year.
One of this nation's major military objectives for at least the past decade acutely, and for a long time before that, has been protecting access to Mideast oil. It turns out that the money we're spending on the Rapid Deployment Force to seize Mideast oil fields, if 1 year of that budget were applied to weatherizing American buildings, we would eliminate our imports of Middle Eastern oil.
If you look, for instance, at the cost of one bomber, you could build with one bomber 75 100-bed hospitals. With one tank, you can build 1,000 schoolrooms to serve 30,000 children. We have in the world today one soldier for every 250 people. And we have one doctor for every 3,700. We have
100 million people employed directly or indirectly in the military. That is 3 times the total number of teachers and doctors. We spend in the world 5.9% of our world gross national product on military spending, 5.9%, and only 1% on public health. And I think most of the world leaders would prefer that it not be that way. They would like to be able to spend their money in other ways. And I think that our job here and in our lives is to lay out what the choices are and to lay out an agenda of those choices and to make it possible for those leaders, whether they're in this country or anywhere else, to take on those right choices and to do it in a way that they have public support and public appeal and feel that they're really doing something that will make them proud of themselves and proud of their countries.
An agenda of choices. What are the possibilities for our future? What is happening now? What can we choose now that will enable us to end hunger and poverty, reduce the threat of nuclear war, protect our environment, revitalize being? Our presenting participants spoke not only of the problems we face, but of our tremendous opportunities in making the choices that will create a world of abundance and harmony. Tom Crum, co-founder of the Windstar Foundation.
One of the biggest myths that we have that get us into inappropriate response to conflict is that conflict is a negative, bad thing. Conflict, in fact, is merely an interference pattern of energies. You look at nature, you see a beautiful beach, and you say, wow, that's very harmonious. But how did that beach get created? Through constant conflict of water banging against rock, breaking it down to form sand, roots and seeds pushing their way up through sand. Constant conflict. Conflict is not negative, it just is. So we need to re-pattern our thinking to understand that it's one of the best opportunities for growth. It's nature's primary motivator for change. The nuclear situation is one of those areas which is so vivid, so real, so touchable, tasteable, literally, that everyone clearly says this is an obstacle. And that, indeed, from one perspective, is an obstacle. On the other hand, it's literally the best opportunity we've ever had to come together as one human family. Finally, for whatever reason, and maybe that was the purpose of this thing called nuclear weapon, the purpose is that finally all of our fears, our anxieties, our insecurities, we've projected strongly enough as a human family into this encapsulated form called a nuclear warhead. Because it's so real, because everyone can get it on whatever level they internally represent things, we can surround ourselves around it as a team. And that truly can bring us together. So what often looks as obstacles, as a matter of fact, can be the real opportunity for the kind of growth that we need to make as a human family.
Renowned futurist Willis Harman, president of the Institute of Noetic Sciences and a senior social scientist at Stanford Research Institute.
Now, I don't think we need to spend a lot of time together reminding ourselves of the predicament that we're in. People around us are doing an adequate job of dwelling on the nuclear weapons problem and the concentrations of toxic chemicals and the deforestation that's going on around the planet, and we could go on and on. Anyone who looks at all of that knows that we have to change. That those problems are not really going to be resolved by more of the same, more technology, more legislation, more management. They're going to be solved only because we have a global mind change.
But let me first start out by telling you that when you fly in space, there's no choice. You look down at this Earth, or as Bucky would always say, in at the Earth, rather than down at it. And it's an incredibly, incredibly beautiful place.
I cannot tell you the difference in the way you feel, the way you relate to the earth and to all life on it after that experience. It comes in a different way. It doesn't come in through the head. It comes in through the heart, in through the gut. And you come down from that experience, you've crossed thousands and thousands of borders and boundaries that are artificially created. They work nice on maps, you know, you can paint them yellow and red and green and blue and orange. But that's not what it is. You don't even see those boundaries and borders. They're there. We created them, guys. But it's up to us to do something about it. And I'd suggest that that perspective is one that might help a little bit in taking responsibility for this planet as a whole and for all the life on it.
I happened to be in Denver and lecturing, and I was asked to go to a school, and I was talking to children ages 6 to 12. It was during the Falkland Island crises. And I happened to ask them, look, if you could be a consultant to a world leader, and they really listened to you, what would you say about bringing peace to this world? And this little 8-year-old boy said, well, Jerry, I'd fight a lot, but I'd tell the world leader that there would never be a problem so big that I would ever consider killing another person for. And the simplicity and the clarity of that statement really went to my heart.
I have decided that learning what I learned from school is only a token that helped me so that I learn other things, to love and to care and to share with other people what I learned from life, not from school, and to help other people so that they have a good life and so that no other children would have to suffer the things that I did to learn the same thing.
Well, I believe that when you give people love and you just keep showing them love, they can't resist it. They automatically start showing you love in return.
I was in Ethiopia just a few weeks ago, and I went to areas where you saw those children starving a year and a half ago. And it's all changed. It's green, and the land is being cultivated, the food is being grown, the children are not malnourished, the people are healthy. But the people came up to me and held my hand and said, you saved our lives. They didn't mean I saved their life, but they meant you, the rest of the world, saved our lives. And it was a very, very moving experience because it showed that we really are a global family and we really can respond to this kind of catastrophe. One of the things that I think you may hear about in the press in the next few weeks is a program called the Kangaroo Mother Program. For a long time, people said, you're going to be able to save the lives of most of the children in the developing world, but one group that you won't be able to do anything about is premature infants. Because the only way you're going to save the life of a premature infant is with a high-technology neonatal nursery, and you can only afford to have those if you have it in the kind of setting that you can only provide in a very sophisticated, developed country in a westernized type hospital. But in Colombia, they tried a program in which they took premature infants, often weighing only 2.5 or 3 pounds, that normally would have died. And what they did was to strap them in a cradle between the mother's breasts and just left them there. And those babies had access to the mother's milk whenever they needed it. They had the warmth of the mother's body, and they also had the proximity and reassurance of the mother's heartbeat. And the experience over the last 2 years is that the survival rate for those babies is as high as babies in this country put into those neonatal cribs, neonatal nurseries.
William Farley, President and CEO of one of the largest and fastest growing companies in America, is also active in promoting U.S.-Soviet trade relations.
Today, motivating people requires caring about their wellness, enriching their work lives, respecting their dignity, and asking for their involvement. Quite simply, people work better when they see their place of work as a community whose members care about and expect the best from each other. In other words, a workplace that will enhance people's sense of self-esteem. I'd say that the New Age corporation should be about giving people the chance to do their own thing, to run their own shop, and to create their own dreams. In short, I believe in a free market system where managers are wise enough to offer incentives that will unite people's self-interest with the best interest of the society at large. When you go to the Soviet Union, one of the first things I was struck by is just how backward that country is in terms of its economy, its technology. And I was also struck by how wonderful, frankly, I felt the Russian people were and are. And there's no problems between the American people and the Russian people. The problem is the system and the governments. And my own feeling is business can be a bridge to improve that relationship between our two countries. And I know Ted believes that because he's put his money where his mouth is with the Goodwill Games.
One thing I am convinced of, and this is once again, it's one man's opinion, it's my personal opinion, but from talking to a number of Soviet leaders, I am absolutely convinced, because I asked them the question, that they are ready to stop the arms race.
I remember last night one of you came to me and very kindly said, well, doesn't it feel bizarre to be that far away from the ocean? And my answer was, and really from the bottom of my heart, the ocean is on the top of your mountains. That water, which ultimately will run down the streams and perhaps, if not too much, interfered with before it reaches the Colorado River, will reach a place where I'm coming from, the wonderful Sea of Cortez. It is one single large body of water, and whether we are here or out there, it's all the same. We organized this expedition to dive off Cape Horn, which we did, and it was a great day, and we filmed it. And as I walked in the back, I will always remember I turned around and I saw the Admiral who was sitting there, and I said, Admiral, we made it, we did it. We made those dives at Cape Horn. And I noticed that his face was crisp, sad, something was wrong. I turned to him and I said, Admiral, what's happening? And I got that shock straight in the face, where he looked at me with very sad eyes, almost tears, and he said, the Challenger just exploded. Here we were at the dead end of the world, but half an hour after it happened, we knew about it. Here we were on that barren spot where a century ago it may have taken 6 months before anybody knew what was happening. There were Americans, there were Chileans, there were French. But there was one people. There was no more boundaries. Suddenly all those borders fell apart. And that's really what it's all about.
It is changing. It has already begun. Sometimes it seems minuscule, the things that have happened on this planet over the last 10, 20 years. But I tell you, the planet will never be the same. Never, ever again. Not from 1945, not from 1960, not from 1977, and not from today. Ever again will the world be the way it was. And what we are seeing here is how it's going to be different. And a big part, in my opinion, in our opinion here at Windstar, of how it's going to be different is expanding our awareness of the opportunities that we have to make choices, to make conscious choices. Health is a conscious choice. Peace is a conscious choice. Wholeness, unity, oneness in every aspect of your life with every other human being is a conscious choice.
As each of us recognize the power of our conscious choices, we will move to ask the question, what can I do? How can I, as an individual, participate directly in this creative process? Although our speakers offered a wide range of unique views, they all agreed on a single point. The power of the individual makes a difference.
I think that notwithstanding the civil rights movement, the women's movement, the environmental movement, David Brower is another one here that led one of those movements. These are movements that are started by people like Rosa Parks, David Brower, Amory Lovins, and are confirmed only after they take place by politicians. Politicians hardly ever lead. We always confirm change after you've made it happen out there. But I put forth that in America, even now, with all those good examples, every one of which are right, that problems still outrun solutions. And we still need some of those other citizen revolutions that take us farther down the road.
Oh, I think the things that excite me the most are groups of people spontaneously getting together and forming an organization to do something, to change things in a creative way, and people learning new ways of dealing with conflict in marriages and corporations and other organizations. Oh, everything that excites me is coming from the bottom up, and everything that distresses me is coming from the top down.
I want to tell you a story about responsibility. I used to be a fighter pilot. In the Air Force, I was stationed in the Philippine Islands, and I used to stand on nuclear alert. And we had that awesome responsibility that if that telephone rang, and if the right words were said, and they checked out against the little envelopes that we had, that we would run out there, start those airplanes, and leap off the ground, heading for the mainland of China, each of us with our target, to drop a nuclear weapon. Now the question, of course, comes when you're thinking about that, of what is the basis on which you make a decision of that kind? Because I fully realized that in releasing that bomb, I would wipe out the lives of somewhere around 1 million people, give or take a few 100,000. And so I asked myself, how do I make that decision? And I decided at that point that if that happened, I knew the people at the other end of that telephone line. I knew them as human beings, real, caring human beings. And I knew that they had different and broader information than I had. And I decided that I would drop that bomb if all of that happened. And I lived with that for several years. Years later, I came back and I, out of the Air Force, and moved into higher in academia, into NASA, back out into government circles, and I began operating at levels at which very crucial decisions were made all through our society, momentous decisions that affect people all over. And I came to realize the quality of the information that was available to those people who made those decisions that affect lives, hundreds, thousands, millions of lives, that somehow makes them different from us. And I came to see that that was not so. That was not the case. Those decisions are made on very, very poor and in many cases inaccurate information. And yet they have to be made by those people. And it was then that I finally realized that back years before, I had made the wrong decision. We cannot pass off our responsibility to other people, no matter how high and no matter how much more information they have. We are responsible based on what we are and what we know for everything we do. And it took me a while to learn that one, but I finally realized it.
People said, well, what group did you go out to meet with out in Snowman's? I said, well, a bunch of do-gooders. You know, what's wrong with, really, what's wrong with doing good? They've always been, oh, those damn liberal do-gooders, But I think it's about the best phrase I can think of to describe it. What I would recommend very strongly is that everybody here and get everyone that you know to get politically active for this next election.
It's conventional to think of resource policy as something that governments or multinational corporations do for us and perhaps to us. But that's really not true. Ultimately, resource policy is done by us alone. Resource management is really the sum of the actions that each one of us takes in our daily lives. And I think it's time that each one of us took responsibility for that and for making the world the way we wanted it to be. A lot of people ask us, what can I do? Ultimately, what each one of us has is our time and the way we choose to spend it. A very dear friend of mine, my favorite folk singer, Kate Wolf, I guess put it the best when she said, "Find what you really care about and live a life that shows it."
We have a lot of choices in this world. We can get up each day and decide that we're not going to be a robot. We're not going to give the power to another person to decide whether we're going to be happy or sad. But we really can choose to experience love rather than fear. We can choose to experience peace rather than conflict. We can choose to be a love finder rather than being a fault finder, as I was most of my life.
Author Richard Alpert, whose spiritual name is Ram Dass, is known as a translator of Eastern concepts into Western language and is chairman of the Siva Foundation.
People always come up to me and they say, is Armageddon about to happen? Or they say, is it the New Age? Is the Aquarian Age just about to happen? Now, I don't really know. And I at first felt inadequate that I shouldn't know, but I didn't. And I gave it deep thought as to how I should answer those questions. And then I realized that if the world were going to end, the best thing I could do at this moment would be to quiet my mind, to open my heart, and to deal with what's on the plate in front of me. That is, do what I can to relieve the suffering around me. Because that's the optimum way to not create bad karma. I'm talking now from my traditions. And it's the optimum way to be ready for the moment of death. On the other hand, if it is to be the New Age, what can I do to help it along? I can quiet my mind, open my heart, and deal with the suffering that's right in front of me on my plate. So I realized it didn't really matter from one point of view, because whichever way it was going to go, I was going to do the same thing.
I see in the world a growing mass of people whose spirituality is really emerging in them. And I see a very active political group. And what I have not yet seen too often is those two groups coming together. And as I look out in the world, I always only see a reflection of myself and what's unfinished in me. And so what has been unfinished till fairly recently was the spirituality in my life and the political action, social justice coming together. Because I really believe now that you cannot be a spiritual being and not be socially conscious. And to be socially conscious without the depth of the spirituality and a higher consciousness of all, it turns you into perhaps a militant being that all you're doing is countering what you see out there in the world. And you have this force going back and forth. Instead of being the action that you want to occur, you're out there fighting against an action that you want to devour. And so bringing spirituality and action together is something that is not just an issue for us now. I think it's up for a lot of people.
I think it is the love for this planet. It is the love for humanity which is one of the great instruments of our progress. The mind alone cannot do it. We have to have sentiment for it. We have to have, as he said, a kind of spirituality towards what we are doing. And then, network. You cannot imagine what one human being can do in a lifetime. How many people do you meet during a day? How many letters do you write? It is incredible what one human being can do. So do it. If we could add together mathematically the people we reach through our songs, through our telecommunications, through our writings, through our speeches, through our daily contacts, the teachers with their children, you might perhaps find out that 1,000 people here in this room are able to reach between 100 and 150 million people. Now, Einstein said that you need only 6% of humanity to work for peace, and that we would have peace. So please network. Go home from snow mass and ask yourself from morning to evening, what can I do? And you can do it in your profession as a teacher. You can do it as an anthropologist. You can do it as a doctor. You can do it in the mass media. John Denver does it as a singer. So please become part of this snow mass avalanche towards a peace in this world.
To acknowledge the power of the individual to make a difference, and to honor those who have, we presented at the symposium the first annual Windstar Award. It is presented to an individual who represents all of us, a person who is living a life of passion and commitment to appropriate and concrete choices. By action and deed, this individual is contributing to the creation of a sustainable future, advocating and promoting ways for all of us to participate.
The first annual Windstar Award goes to Jacques-Yves Cousteau, Captain Cousteau of the Calypso. Jean-Michel, you come up.
Captain Jacques-Yves Cousteau is a shining example of what one man can do. Each of us, in our own lives, in our own way, has a tremendous contribution to make through our conscious choices. Truly, the Windstar Award could go to any one of us who has a vision for the future and is working to make that vision real. Now, at this critical time, we have the greatest opportunity in history to create a future that is sustaining, fulfilling, and nurturing for all human beings. A you and me world.
The Choices for the Future communique to leaders and citizens of planet Earth from the Windstar Foundation's Choices for the Future Symposium. The Windstar Foundation presents this synopsis of vital choices for the future, which affect the lives of us all.
We are on the threshold of a major evolutionary shift in becoming truly human. There has always existed a basic human need to create security for ourselves and our children. Throughout human history, we have responded to this need by creating ever more sophisticated and effective weapons to defend ourselves or to attack others. However, with the development of nuclear weapons, we have succeeded to such a technological extent that we have made war obsolete. Waging war is no longer a win-lose game with victors and spoils. The arms race takes on the ludicrous image of angry, feuding crew members on a precious, life-supporting spaceship sitting in a puddle of gasoline making matches. As an old Chinese sage said, unless we change our direction, we are likely to end up where we are headed. Peace is no longer a philosophical choice. It is a survival choice. Peace is a powerful and courageous conscious choice.
Humanity is faced with issues and challenges on a scale never before experienced. In addition to the existence of enough nuclear weaponry to destroy our planet many times over, we have ecological crises, agricultural systems that cannot be sustained, massive hunger and starvation, lack of adequate health and sanitation, illiteracy and poor education, and many equally serious threats to the well-being of the human family and all life on Earth. While this does not affirm the best of humanity and the choices we have made, we recognize that we can make different choices. Each of us is responsible for the future. We recognize that it is time for us to return to common sense and to make conscious choices about how we live on this planet. For us, this choice is livingry rather than weaponry. For us, this choice is a shift from you or me to you and me. Peace is a conscious choice. The choice is yours.
We're not passengers on Spaceship Earth. We're the crew. We're not just residents on this planet. We're citizens. The difference in both cases is responsibility.
people protect what they love.
We are the dwelling place of incredible possibilities and opportunities. They live in us, with consciousness about who and what we are, with the awareness of the problems that we're faced with a commitment not only to ourselves but to each other that we can make it work. We will make it work. We will make it work.